is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom, and welcome to the Jewish Spotlight. I'm Rabbi Tuvia Teldin, Director of Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island. I want to welcome you to a program. We're going to talk about some very serious issues that are facing the Jewish community and the community at large. And we're going to look into how the Jewish community deals with the issue of divorce. Well, let's face it, we've spoken about marriage here, we've spoken about child rearing, we've spoken about many of the issues that Judaism holds very dear when it comes to Jewish continuity and comes to those issues that are of great moral importance to us. However, in addition, there's always the fact that 20% of Jewish marriages don't make it. There's a time when people just decide that it's time to quit, time to throw in the towel, time to do something in order to be able to allow their lives to go on. And in Judaism, we allow for this because this is something that the Torah itself says is a very real part of life, and there is place for it in the Jewish community. So we have with us today somebody who is able to really illuminate for us and elucidate many of the issues that have to do with divorce. And I want to invite or thank you for coming. This is Rabbi Moshe Portnoy, who is the Av Beis Din, the head of the Jewish court for Long Island, and also, of course, the Rabbi of the Young Israel of Plainview.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rabbi Teldin.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Rabbi Portnoy is very well known in the Plainview and also in the whole of Long Island for his leadership and his much work in terms of the Jewish community on many issues that are of very great importance. And we want to, of course, discuss something that is of great concern, not only, of course, to the rabbinate, but to the layman as well, and that is, what exactly is a Jewish divorce? What makes a Jewish divorce unique? What makes it different? How is it different from a civil divorce?
Well, let's start at the beginning. The Hebrew word get is a reference to the Jewish divorce, which, as you alluded to, is very different and apart from the civil proceedings and the civil judgment of divorce. The premise is that when a Jewish couple gets married, the definition of marriage is kiddushin, which is sanctification. And that implies that a husband and a wife become sanctified to one another, and they become one couple, one soul. The two souls are united. The only way to separate them in the eyes of God and the Jewish religion, as halakha teaches us, is through the process of the Jewish divorce or get.
And this is something that's defined in the Torah itself, in the five books of Moses.
This is explicitly defined in the Torah and very, very well elucidated, as you say, through the body of the Shulchan Aruch, which is the code of Jewish law, and the Talmud, right, and all Jewish sources.
Okay, now, when somebody comes to you, at what point do they call Rabbi Portnoy in order to find out what is involved with a Jewish divorce? After their civil divorce, before their civil divorce, when they're first starting to think about divorce, do they come to you for counseling sometimes to see if maybe you can help them, that they shouldn't have to go through a divorce?
Well, we view, as the head, the administrator of the Beth Din of Long Island, we view our roles primarily as rabbis rather than as divorcers, quote unquote.
That's encouraging.
Yes, we try to be encouraging, actually.
Okay.
What that means is that as rabbis, first and foremost, our primary role is to create harmony and peace between a husband and a wife. And our primary focus is to see if there's any possible way of reconciliation where the husband and wife can remain married for years to come.
And have you ever had a situation you've been able to prevent a divorce? Great.
Yes, we had one case a couple of years ago where we were already at the proceedings where the get was taking place, and the scribe was actually writing the get, and somehow my instinct told me that this get should not go forward. The chemistry between the husband and wife was too strong. The bonds, the emotional ties seemed to be too strong. They both seemed very unhappy about this, and I had a feeling that this get should not go forwards, this divorce should not go forwards. And I called the husband out into the hallway, and I spoke with him, and he kind of wasn't even really sure why they're here. Mm-hmm. And then I called the wife out, and I said, should this get go forwards? And she couldn't give me an adequate reason why. And I walked in and I told both of them, I don't think, if you trust my judgment as a rabbi, I don't think this get should go forwards.
And they listened to you.
And I walked in and I told the scribe, please stop writing. We are hereby terminating the proceedings, and I'd like to see both of you in my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. About 5 years later, they're still together.
Wonderful.
And it's very, very
That's
hard
a
work.
success story.
Yes. We consider that
Wonderful.
success. Yes.
So tell me, there are many misconceptions people have about what exactly is involved with getting a Jewish divorce. They feel they're coming to this board of rabbis, they're going to be interrogated,
Right.
there's going to be a very intimidating type of scenery that they're going to not enjoy whatsoever. Sometimes, of course, husband and wife don't even want to see each other, be found in the same room.
Right.
What is an actual get process? What is involved, and how would you encourage somebody if, of course, they do find themselves in a situation where there's no other way of saving this marriage, of going through and making sure that they do have a Jewish divorce?
Well, the actual proceedings, if we're fairly certain, actually more than fairly, if we're certain that the get should go forwards, present at the get, at a typical get, would be at least 3 rabbis, sometimes 4,
Okay.
plus the spouses, the husband and wife.
And they can bring their own rabbi with them if they want.
They
to
can bring their
feel
own
comfortable.
rabbi should they desire.
Or family members, for
They
instance,
can bring
anybody
a
who
family.
would make them feel comfortable?
Yes, they're allowed. No problem.
Okay.
Bring a family member for moral support. Although I should really add that it's really not necessary. I mean, they're welcome to do that, but they need not feel that they're going to need the moral support simply because the actual get process is very non-confrontational. It is non-adversarial per se. It is a very low-key procedure, and we try to make the parties feel as comfortable as possible.
Okay.
To sum it up very quickly, what happens at a get, and I've heard all kinds of stories. One person asked me, does somebody have to spit at a get? And I said, I haven't found
You
that
haven't
to
done
be.
that yet.
I haven't found that to be true. Is anyone going to have to step on anyone's foot? And I said, unless it's an accident. Does anyone have to walk around anyone else? And I say, well, if you're dizzy, you may do that, but it's not part of
Not
our.
required.
It's not required. What really happens is the Beth Din, which is the actual rabbinical tribunal, which consists of 3 rabbis, is going to want to first determine that the husband is giving the get freely and unconditionally,
Okay.
without duress, without prior restraints or constraints. He never made a vow or a promise or an oath to give or not to give a get, which means that he would be giving it under duress. And the rabbis will ask him a number of questions. Did you ever make a vow or promise to give or not to give? He will say no. If you made one but you forgot, we have the biblical authority to absolve you, which we call hatarat nedarim, which we can take off any vows.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make any statements which can nullify or invalidate the get, such as the husband said, the whole thing is nonsense, I'm going, but it doesn't mean anything. If he made any statements, then he has to hereby make a statement that he cancels any prior statements that can weaken or nullify the get.
Okay.
Once we determine that it is being given freely and unconditionally, then the husband will appoint the scribe to write the get for him. He will appoint 2 witnesses to sign the get. He has to authorize and appoint them.
All right.
And the same 2 witnesses to witness the delivery of the get. At that point, the scribe will actually write the get. It has to be handwritten, the same type of script as in the Torah. It's 12 lines, and it takes about 20 minutes or so.
In fact, we
to
have
write.
here a copy of
Yes.
the get that you brought along. I just want to show it to our
This is an actual
to our
get that I
audience.
brought along. It's been an executed
Right.
get. And as you see, well, as you can't see, but it's
Right, it's
12 lines.
12
And there are
lines.
2 signatures on the bottom, which have to be done.
Right.
Once the ink
And
is
this incidentally is torn.
the reason it's torn is to show that it was used and it can never be reused again.
Okay.
We only use the get once. And once it's dry, it is folded up. The husband gives it to the wife. The wife has to state, we're going to ask, are you accepting this get freely and unconditionally, without duress or without restraints or constraints? And after that, the husband actually gives it to the wife in front of the Beth Din, in front of the tribunal.
Now, what if one of the members is willing to cooperate with you, but is not willing to be in the same room? Or doesn't he want to even come to your location in order to be able to partake of the ceremony?
We have procedures to
You can take
deal
care
with
of
those
that.
situations.
Okay.
If one of the spouses is less cooperative than the other, we can deal with it, and we have dealt with it in many, many cases.
Well, what do you do, let's say, if the man doesn't want to give the get, and the woman wants to have the get? Because, of course, as you well know, and as our audience might not know, the fact is in Jewish law, neither member is considered to be divorced in the eyes of God unless there is a get to go along with it. If they have a civil divorce, it means nothing as far as an actual divorce to give them the ability to remarry in the eyes of God or to be able to do anything as far as other relationships are concerned.
I should also point out to you, Rabbi Teldin, that the get is biblically, according to the Torah, is more important perhaps than even the marriage. In cases, for example, where a couple only had a civil marriage, where they were not married in a religious ceremony, but they have been husband and wife, they still need a get. Because the fact that they're living together as husband and wife, that means that they are considered husband and wife and should have a get. Or if they had, doesn't matter whether they had an Orthodox, a conservative, a Reform, or a Reconstructionist wedding, they should also have a get. And it is really very important, and they are not separated in the eyes of God and the Jewish religion unless and until they have a Jewish divorce. It's very important.
So what have you done to try to convince people of the importance of having a get? Even though there's a tremendous amount of emotions and they're resistant, how do you come to them and tell them, well, listen, in the eyes of God, this is important? Some people are going to laugh at you and say, well, I don't care. I want to have nothing to do with this woman. I don't care if it has anything to do, if it means helping her or helping him, I'm not going to do it.
Well, the bottom line is that the get is important for both parties. There is a misconception that the wife needs a get and the husband does not. And that is absolutely untrue. That is a misinformation.
Okay. Can you explain that? Because that definitely is a common misconception.
Right. The husband cannot be remarried in Jewish religion according to halacha, according to Jewish law, as stated in the Code of Jewish Law, unless he has a get from his prior marriage. This is what halacha teaches us, and it has been so for 1,000 years now, since a great rabbinical figure called Rabbeinu Gershom. And so for practical purposes, the husband needs a get as well as the wife. And when I explain that, and you're absolutely correct, there's a lot of emotion. People are distraught and angry and bitter and sometimes
revengeful,
vindictive. Right. Revengeful, yes. But it's in their own self-interest to do it. And I've told people many times, while the two of you are together, do it while the going is good. One of you may move out of state. One of you, God forbid, can become mentally incapacitated, at which point it becomes impossible to do a get. And so it's in your own self-interest to have the get done, and to know that you can move on in the eyes of God. You can move on with the rest of your life. We as rabbis have no axe to grind. We are not taking the husband's side or the wife's side. We are merely here to provide a service to see that two people who need to move on with their lives have that opportunity.
Now, just as a little bit of background, of course, you started giving out gets, I believe it was, how many years ago?
Oh, about
8 years ago?
7 years ago.
7 years ago?
Yeah.
And you chose Massapequa as a site. Now, before that, there were never any kosher gets that were ever made on Long Island.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit for our audience what the reason for that is and why you chose Massapequa?
Well, it's an interesting question you're asking, Rabbi Teldin. Actually, my community is Plainview.
Right.
I'm the rabbi of the Young Israel of Plainview, in addition to being the administrator of the Beth Din. I would have obviously preferred that we be able to do the get in Plainview. It would have made my life considerably easier.
Because you've done how many gets during the course of the last 7 years?
I'm sorry?
How many gets have you performed during the last 7 years?
Oh, I would say probably close to 300.
300.
Right.
So you're quite busy going back and forth with Massapequa.
No. It's not a question of time. I also have a very busy schedule with my Young Israel, my
sure.
own congregants, and
Right.
ministering to my own congregants. But the reason we had to choose Massapequa is because in the get, which is just held up before, there are no designations as to location where the get is being written. We don't use zip codes. We don't use counties or states or countries. The only designation to say that the get was written in such and such a place are natural topographical features, water streams, occasionally if they're well-known mountains, and therefore you need to have a place where there's two sources of water which can clearly identify the place. Now, Plainview, there are about 6 Plainviews in America. There's Plainview, Texas, Plainview, Illinois, there's Plainview in a couple of other states. And Plainview has no natural bodies of water other than the underground aquifers, which are really generic. There's no specific name to them. And so we could not designate Plainview as the place to write a get. So we scoured for, about 5 years. We researched a number of communities, and we wanted to be equidistant, somewhere close to the Nassau-Suffolk border, so that both counties can take advantage of this. And we came upon Massapequa, which indeed sits on the river Massapequa and the ocean shore. And those are the 2 designations.
Interesting.
When we write the get is being written officially as Massapequa, which sits on the ocean shore and the river Massapequa. And those are the 2 designations that we use, and this is the designations that are accepted throughout the world. In other words, the name Massapequa is accepted by the rabbinate in Israel and South America and America throughout the world.
Because there's no other place.
There's no other place in Nassau County.
Let me get to a little bit of a different topic. Sometimes from the end of a marriage relationship, you can see a little bit about the beginning of that relationship also. And we all know the difficulties and the challenges that are being faced by many couples as far as making marriage work. Seeing the amount of divorces that you see and the reasons why people divorce, do you have some insight into what could perhaps be done by people in a marriage that is struggling a little bit, how to patch things up in the right time in order to prevent the possibility of getting to the point that they have to meet with you?
Well, meeting with the Beis Din is, of course, does not necessarily mean that it's the end of the marriage. We would hope that they would come to us, not only if, God forbid, they should need a get, but hopefully to help them in their marriage as well.
Okay. And does that happen?
It does happen. We do marriage counseling, where we meet very short term with couples, and thank God we have been very helpful, I believe, in a number of marriages, and strongly suggested that it should not go to divorce or to a get. I think there is a role to be played, and of course we do not play psychologists, nor therapists, nor marriage counselors. We are rabbinic clerics, and we understand the role of a cleric and where we should not venture further. But I think the moral authority of a rabbi is such that in a number of cases, a rabbi can play a very effective role where the parties trust the rabbi.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we try very, very hard.
Also? Definitely.
Yes, and we try very hard to not break up marriages, but to maintain the marriages.
Mm-hmm. But what problems do you find most commonly that would give people an indication? Is a communication problem? Are people getting preoccupied by details which are really not of such great importance that they can't be overcome? What are some of the common things that you find amongst the 300 divorces you've done that would give us an indication of where the pitfalls are that lead to this, so people can hopefully prevent it or avoid it for their own lives?
Right. You're raising a very interesting point. 20 years ago, in order for marriage to break up, there had to have been very serious issues. Abuse, neglect, abandonment, things of that nature. Today, I am hearing a lot of things such as, well, we grew apart.
Right.
And when I ask the parties, what does it mean they grew apart? Well, we have different interests. We have different wants and needs out of life. And I will tell couples who are married 40 years who come for a get, which is unheard of, unprecedented. And I say, but you got basically, I mean, you've been husband and wife for 40 years, couples who are 70s, in their 70s, who are eagerly looking forwards to their divorce and their new life. At least that's what they're telling us. And it's something which is very, very new. I think expectations of marriage have become a lot greater, and couples are expecting that a husband and wife have to be in sync every day, all the time. And if there are differences of opinion, differences on world outlook, or differences about things that 20, 25 years ago would have been considered not life-threatening, that a couple can learn to live together. I think couples today are far more increasingly saying to each other, if we're not in total sync, we should not be married.
So they're willing to sacrifice the institution of marriage much quicker.
I think people are willing to forego the institution of marriage a lot quicker than they would have 20 years ago.
I think a lot of the problem also is, what is the motivation a person has for getting married in the first place? In other words, what are the expectations? They bring up a good point. People have higher expectations. In certain ways, I think, I agree with what you're saying as far as being higher expectations, but in certain ways, I think people are so afraid of getting too excited about the marriage that they make lower expectations from the very beginning. So just in case it doesn't work out, it won't be such a problem, I won't have such an emotional commitment, and I'll be able to make an easy divorce.
Right.
And we'll write all the divorce proceedings into the marriage itself. And that way, there's not too much that either of us are going to be losing. So marriage itself, from both ends, is really getting cut down because people are, I think, much less confident, not only in the institution itself, but in themselves, as being able to have the ability to go through the difficulties of dealing with potential conflicts that are going to come out of this relationship.
Right. There are a couple of interesting, I think, sociological trends that are associated with this. In the religious community, in the Orthodox religious traditional community, I think over the last 10 years, I think we're finding that young people, young men and young women, are getting married at a far earlier age. I think today you will find in the religious day schools and in the yeshivot, which are the religious schools,
Right.
that young ladies are getting married, becoming engaged by 18 years old. The young men are becoming engaged by 20 and 21, which is much younger than we've seen in that community, let's say even 10 or 15 years ago.
So you're saying that's good or that's not so good?
On the one hand, I think that is very good.
Okay.
Parents come to me and they say, well, they're so young, they're babies, they're children. The response I have is, well, let's look at the other end of the spectrum, where you have the young people who are determined not to get married until they're well into careers, well into their life. They set a goal for themselves. I want to make VP of the company before I'm going to entertain marriage.
Right.
I have to be the chief of this or the head of this division. And they're waiting till their 30s, early 30s, mid-30s, late 30s. And frankly, supposedly now that they're settled and they know what they want and they have a mellow outlook on life and they've lived a little bit, I frankly don't see how this additional wisdom has helped the marriage rate. I mean, the marriage failure among that group is fairly
Rather
high.
Right.
And so I don't know that there's anything to be weighted, to people are older or more mature or more settled in their careers. I don't see the marriage rate having a greater success. And so when couples come to me and they say that they want to get married at 18 and 21 respectively, or 19 and 21 respectively, I say, well, if they're in love and they both know they have to struggle for a couple of years until they're set in their ways, until they have some financial stability, let them do that.
And if they have the right basis as far as an understanding of where they're going to and a commonality of goals and morals
if there's
and
a
ethics.
commonality of backgrounds,
Right.
and a commonality of families and a commonality of upbringing, I think that's 85% of the marriage right there.
All right. Rabbi Portnoy, can you tell us your phone number? If anybody out there wants some type of marriage counseling or wants to be able to speak to you or hopefully is not in need of a Jewish divorce but might have some questions, or if, God forbid, they do need a divorce.
Our phone is open. If anyone has any inquiries or needs any information or would like to speak confidentially, our telephone number is 516-938-5766.
Okay, we have it up on
And
the
we
screen.
invite whatever inquiries you have. We love to
Okay.
get calls.
Very good. Can you tell us maybe a couple of, or maybe one experience you've had in processing a get, of dealing with a family and the kind of turmoil that a family goes through, something that you think might be of interest to our audience?
Well,
Without mentioning names, of course.
Well, we will leave the names out to protect
Right.
the innocent.
Right.
There are cases, to be sure, where a get is more than warranted. And we've had some situations where the husband or the erstwhile husband and wife really were at loggerheads with one another. And there was, you could tell there was a lot of animosity. They could barely look at each other. And so in those cases, we certainly consider that we're doing a wonderful service for the family. Mm-hmm. And that they would be happier living apart and not being husband and wife.
I'm sure you've come across a lot of very interesting circumstances.
We have
not always so pleasant.
We have come across interesting circumstances. We have had cases where whole families, the husband's whole family came on one side, the wife's whole family came on the other side.
I'm glad I wasn't there.
And there was, we had to keep the two families apart,
Really?
literally.
One last quick question. Do you need a civil divorce before you go for a get? Should you get a get first before the civil divorce? What do you suggest? Does it make a difference or not?
The truth is, and I'm glad you raised the issue, Rabbi Telton, the truth is that it does not make a difference. We will do the get even before the divorce. It does not mean that you have to have a civil divorce.
As long as the two people are out of the house?
As long as they are no longer living together under the same roof.
Right.
In other words, if they are separated physically, then they can get a get even if they don't have a civil divorce.
Okay,
in some cases, recommended even.
All right. Very good. Well, I want to thank you for sharing with us all
My
that
pleasure.
information. It's been very informational, and I think it's something that we wouldn't normally, of course, hear about. But hopefully we won't have to hear too much. But in case anybody is in need of some help on that end, Rabbi Portnoy, I know from dealing with him personally, with many of the people who we've brought to his base din, has dealt with them very, very sensitively, and it's unfortunately an experience sometimes people need to go through in life.
Let me just end by
Sure.
saying that marriage, according to Jewish religion, is an institution that is created in heaven.
Right.
And we hope that everyone's marriage will flourish and stay successful.
All right.
And that couples will choose to stay together.
Okay, I'll take that as a blessing for everybody out there, that their marriages should go on for many, many years and they shouldn't have to come to you.
Right.
Okay. In the meantime, though, just want to wrap up by reminding everybody who watches the Jewish Spotlight that we have many Chabad centers throughout Long Island. Of course, there are many young Israels also throughout Long Island. And you feel free to give us a call, look us up. We're at 58 Comac Road in Comac, New York. Our phone number is 462-7383. And in addition, of course, if you ever like to look us up on our website, it's chabadli.org, or else you can call us on the superphone, which is 516-76-SUPER, to learn whatever you want, a little bit of a Dvar Torah, a story, something from the Torah portion of the week. And of course, it's always good to pick up a phone and find out a little bit more about what it means to be Jewish. And just like tonight, we've been able to show you a little bit of Judaism that maybe you haven't heard about before, or really were not familiar with, or had questions about, but never had the opportunity to ask, that there are so many different areas in Judaism that could be eye-openers to learn more about what it means to be Jewish, and the positive aspects of what it means to be Jewish, that it would be an experience that I'm sure you'd be able to benefit from tremendously. So in the meantime, have a great week, and don't forget, do something between now and next week to make your world and your community and your family a better place to live. Shalom.